Your first step is to press the seams out nice and flat. And then we're going to come in with a 1-inch strip of bias. Now you can use store-bought if you'd like. I actually had this on hand, but you can see I cut it on the bias. It's nice and stretchy. It's super easy to work with, and it's not going to fray. All right, and I've completed one here, and now I'm going to do the other side for you so you can see how the process works. I'm just going to pin it in place on the right side of this seam allowance here. Just a couple of pins. And next I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm just going to stitch along this line here. I'm just catching the seam allowance, not the main fabric panel here. And I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to be pretty close to this edge here. Just keeping everything nice and lined up here on my sample. People have mixed feelings about Hong Kong seam finishes, but this is a really great project to try it on. Low stakes, and it's a really nice option for those thicker layers, again, particularly if you're working with batting layers. So I'm just working my way along here. Almost done. My next step is to pull and press this bias tape out away from the seam allowance. Let's see here. And I've used a nice contrasting fabric here, but you could use your lining fabric and this would be virtually invisible. Or you could use your exterior fabric for a similar effect. Okay, it's looking pretty neat and tidy. My next step is to lay this out flat. I'm actually going to just fold this to the wrong side of the seam allowance here. And the thing I really love about this technique is that you can just leave this raw. It's not going to fray, and it's also going to be tucked in behind this seam. I'm going to use a couple of pins to secure this in place. Okay, just one more here. And then your next step is to stitch in the ditch along this edge here where you've turned the bias away from the main fabric. And that is going to catch this underneath layer and keep it nice and secure. Again, we're just stitching in the ditch here, getting as close to that folded bias edge as we can. But not stressing too much about it because, again, this will be on the interior of the jacket. Still want it to look nice though. Right, that looks very neat and tidy. I'm going to fold this out so we can take a look here. If this bias extends a little bit past so it's not folding in and laying completely flat, you can always come in and trim that off a little bit so you get a nice clean flat finish. So you're going to do this on both sides of your seam allowance, at the side seam and on the underarm seam, and then you can move along to the next step, which is to actually install the sleeves. I've got my jacket bodice wrong side out and my sleeves right side out. And all I did was come in here and match these seams up together, pin along this arm side edge for both sleeves. I'm actually going to take it to the machine next and stitch both of those seams, and then we'll check back in.